He had power, wealth, and the whole world watching him.
They saw an ordinary bride, but they had no idea who she really was.
You don't deserve this. Forgive me, Your Majesty.
Subscribe for more videos. Turn on notifications.
The guests rose to their feet as the groom entered the cathedral. He was the kind of man magazines called unstoppable. Kylan Duvall. Young, brilliant, ruthless. The billionaire son of one of the most powerful business families in America. Every camera followed him as he walked down the aisle in a perfectly tailored black suit, his jaw hard, his eyes cold, his expression unreadable. But Kylan Duvall was not there for love. He was there because a dead man's final condition had left him with no choice. At the altar, the priest adjusted his glasses and looked toward the entrance. Then the bride appeared. She did not walk in like a woman trying to impress the room. She walked in quietly, gracefully, almost gently. Her name was Zara Adebayo. To the guests, she looked painfully out of place. She wore an elegant gown, but there was nothing flashy about her. No diamonds drowning her neck, no dramatic performance in her smile, no hunger in her eyes. Only stillness. The guests whispered as she passed. Is that really her? She's the one? She looks so ordinary. A village schoolteacher, they said. A schoolteacher? And Kylan Duvall married her? No one understood it. Not the socialites, not the reporters, not even the board members seated in the front row. But above all, not Kylan. He stared at her as she stopped beside him. Then he leaned slightly closer and whispered so only she could hear. Smile for the cameras. This is the first and last day anyone in this room will ever mistake this arrangement for love. Zara did not flinch. She did not look angry. She did not even look hurt. She only turned toward the priest. And that calm response irritated him more than any argument could have. Because Kylan had spent his entire life understanding power. And power, to him, was loud. It was money, influence, speed, headlines, control. But this woman standing beside him had none of those things. At least, that was what he believed. The ceremony began. The priest spoke of union, trust, and sacred commitment, but Kylan heard none of it. His mind was fixed on one thought. Once the legal condition was fulfilled, he would be free. Because 10 years earlier, his late grandfather had altered the family trust in a way no one expected. If Kylan wanted controlling ownership of Duvall Holdings before turning 35, he had to marry the daughter of a woman named Adeline Adebayo. That daughter was Zara. No explanation, no negotiation, no exception. Just one final instruction sealed inside a trust his grandfather had never revoked. Kylan had tried everything to escape it. He offered settlements, lawyers, appeals, private investigations, but every road ended in the same sentence. Marry Zara Adebayo, or lose the company. So he made the only choice he could tolerate. He would marry her. But he would never respect her, never love her, never allow her to believe she belonged in his world. When the vows were over and the guests erupted in applause, Zara turned to him with calm eyes. He gave her the smile the cameras wanted, and whispered again, "You may have my name now." Don't confuse that with having my life. The reception was held that evening in the grand glass ballroom of the Duvall estate, where crystal chandeliers burned above a sea of diamonds, silk, and political influence. Governors came, celebrities came, executives came. People who never attended weddings unless power was involved came. And through it all, Zara remained composed. She thanked the servers. She greeted the elderly. She moved through the room without trying to be noticed. Kylan watched her from a distance, already annoyed by how difficult she was to embarrass. He had expected awe. He had expected awkwardness. He had expected a poor woman trying too hard. Instead, he found a woman who behaved as if none of this mattered. That unsettled him. So he escalated. At the center of the ballroom, Kylan raised a champagne glass and called for silence. "My friends," he said smoothly, "I'd like you all to properly meet my wife, Zara Duvall. She has traveled a long way from a very small village school, so if she seems overwhelmed by all this, let's try to be understanding." Laughter rolled softly through the room, not loud enough to be cruel, just polite enough to wound. A woman in pearls tilted her head. "How charming! Tell me, Zara, where did you study?" Zara answered simply, "At St. Catherine's Teachers' College." Deliver this as the world forgot your mother too quickly. The woman blinked. "Oh, I meant after that." That was enough for the children I teach. A few guests exchanged amused looks. Another man joined in. "And what exactly do you teach?" "Reading, literature, history, sometimes courage." That drew a small ripple of reaction. Kylan smiled thinly. "Courage?" "Yes," Zara said. "Many children need that before they can learn anything else." For a moment the room quieted, not because she had raised her voice, but because she had not. She had answered without insecurity, without apology, as if dignity were the most natural language she knew. Then something unexpected happened. An elderly man near the back of the ballroom straightened so quickly that his chair scraped the floor. His name was Elias Vale, former ambassador, global humanitarian advisor, one of those rare men whose presence carried more weight than titles. Kylan knew him well enough to understand one thing immediately. Elias Vale did not react to strangers. Yet the man was staring at Zara as if he had seen a ghost. Slowly, Elias walked forward. The room parted for him. When he reached Zara, his eyes shone with something dangerously close to emotion. "May I ask you one question?" he said quietly. "Of course," Zara replied. "Do you still keep the notebooks?" For the first time that night, something changed in her face. Not fear, recognition. "Yes," she said softly. "Every one of them." Elias closed his eyes for a brief second, as if steadying himself. Then he bowed his head. Not to Kylan, to Zara. The ballroom went silent. Kylan felt his stomach tighten. No one in that room missed what had just happened. A man powerful enough to command presidents had bowed his head to a village teacher. Before Kylan could intervene, Elias stepped back, and then he turned and walked away. The party never truly recovered after that. Conversations resumed, music continued, and glasses clinked as before, but the air had changed. Kylan saw people looking at Zara differently now, not as a curiosity, as a mystery. Late that night, long after the guests had gone, Kylan returned to his private study. On his desk lay a sealed envelope.
No stamp, no signature. Inside was an old photograph. In it stood his grandfather, younger and thinner, beside a group of exhausted aid workers in what looked like a remote emergency camp somewhere in Africa. Standing beside him was a dark-skinned woman with intelligent eyes and an expression of impossible calm. At her side was a little girl holding a stack of books. On the back of the photo were 7 handwritten words. "She is alive because of them."
Kylan stared at the child, then at the woman, then upstairs toward the room where Zara was staying. Not in the master suite, not in the main wing. He had assigned her to the old guest quarters near the service garden. An insult disguised as accommodation. Now, for the first time, it did not feel strategic. It felt ugly. The next morning, Kylan found Zara outside in the estate's lower courtyard, kneeling beside the gardener's granddaughter with a torn reading workbook. She was helping the child sound out words with the same patience one might offer something sacred. The child laughed when she got a sentence right. Zara smiled. A real smile. Not the polite one she had worn all day yesterday. Kylan stood still. He had seen investors beg for his attention. He had seen models rehearse their expressions before meeting him. He had seen men lie, flatter, manipulate, and perform. But whatever this woman was, she was never performing. That afternoon, 3 black SUVs arrived at the estate. Then 2 more. Security alerted Kylan immediately. The visitors were not scheduled. When the doors opened, his confusion deepened. Elias Vale stepped out first. Behind him came a retired Supreme Court justice, a Nobel Prize-winning physician, and the founder of one of the largest education charities in the world. None of them had come to see Kylan. They had come for Zara. Kylan demanded an explanation in the drawing room. Instead of answering him, Elias looked to Zara. "Forgive us," he said. "We tried to stay away, but the marriage made secrecy impossible." Kylan's voice hardened. Secrecy about what? No one answered at first. Finally, the retired justice spoke. Wife has spent half her life protecting something dangerous. Kylan frowned. From who? From the sort of people who steal from suffering, said the physician. Zara lowered her eyes. Kylan, she said quietly, there are things I never wanted brought into your family. He laughed once, without humor. My family? You think this is about protecting us? I still don't even know who you are. Elias stepped forward. No, he said. That is precisely the problem. You know almost nothing about the woman you married. The room fell still. Then Elias turned to Zara with gentleness. Would you like to tell him? She was silent for a moment. Then she shook her head. No. Let his grandfather do it. That same evening, Kylan drove to the old Duvall Legal Archive building where his grandfather's personal records had been preserved. An attorney met him there. Locked drawer, private file, restricted until marriage. Inside were medical reports, field journals, handwritten letters, and dozens of newspaper clippings from an outbreak nearly 3 decades earlier. And one name appeared again and again. Dr. Adeline Adebayo, epidemiologist, field strategist, emergency educator. The woman in the old photograph, Zara's mother. She had not been a forgotten village woman. She had been one of the most brilliant crisis doctors on the continent.
When a deadly disease spread through isolated communities, governments failed, funding stalled, and international agencies panicked. But Adeline Adebayo stayed. She built quarantine protocols from almost nothing, trained villagers overnight, created survival systems where none existed, protected children when even soldiers fled. And during one of those missions, she saved the life of Kylan's grandfather. Not only his life, his reputation, his company's future. Because the elder Duvall had been in Africa during a humanitarian venture that should have destroyed him financially and morally. Adeline had prevented the disaster from becoming a global scandal. Yet the deeper Kylan read, the stranger it became. After her death, public recognition surrounding Adeline Adebayo vanished with shocking speed. Awards were declined, foundations were redirected, interviews canceled, records sealed. And every path led back to one person, Zara. She had inherited not wealth, but responsibility. Pages later, Kylan found the final letter written by his grandfather. It was addressed to him. If you are reading this, you already married her.
You probably believe I bound you to a poor teacher for reasons of debt, duty, or guilt. You are wrong. I did it because I once met greatness disguised as humility, and I recognized the same spirit in her daughter. If you become the kind of man who can stand beside Zara Adebayo without needing to stand above her, then perhaps you deserve the company too. Kylan read the line 3 times, then sat back in silence. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar. Shame. Not strategic discomfort, not irritation, not wounded pride. Shame. Because piece by piece, the image he had built of Zara was collapsing. He returned home after midnight. The house was quiet. A light still burned in Zara's room. He knocked. "Come in," she said. Inside, she sat at a small desk surrounded by children's letters, donation reports, and lesson plans. No jewelry, no luxury shopping bags, no interest in the wealth around her. Only work. He held up the file. "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked at the papers, then back at him. "Would you have listened?" He had no answer, so she continued. "My mother spent her life helping communities survive greed, politics, and neglect. Before she died, she discovered that funds meant for rural schools and clinics were being rerouted through shell charities. She hid the proof." Kylan's chest tightened. "Where?" "I don't know." He stared. "You don't know?" She told me only this. If the wrong people ever found those records, they would bury the truth and buy silence everywhere else. So I lived quietly. I taught. I moved carefully. I stayed ordinary. "Ordinary?" he repeated. Her eyes met his. "Yes. Ordinary is invisible. Invisible is safe." Now he understood. Her simplicity had not been helplessness. It had been camouflage. The next morning, federal investigators arrived. Not local police, not press. Federal investigators. They requested a private meeting with Zara. Kylan insisted on being present. The lead agent opened a folder and placed several recovered documents on the table. "We've spent 11 years tracing a network that siphoned humanitarian funds through fake education programs," she said. 3 months ago, a courier death in Brussels reopened a dormant line of evidence. Yesterday, we verified the final link. She looked at Zara. "Your mother left records hidden within a chain of school supply inventories and handwritten literacy reports. Most criminals never looked at them because they assumed classroom records were worthless. Zara's hand trembled slightly. "And the final code?" she asked. The agent nodded. It was concealed in children's reading scores. Kylan stared in disbelief. The agent continued. "Those records protected the evidence long enough for us to identify the board members, brokers, and charity directors involved. Arrests have already begun." Zara closed her eyes, not in triumph, in relief. The physician who had visited the day before stepped forward. "There's something else he should know." Kylan looked at him. "For the last 13 years, the man said, while you built luxury towers and fought market wars, your wife quietly ran one of the most effective anonymous literacy networks in the developing world." Kylan frowned. "What?" Zara looked uncomfortable. The physician smiled sadly. "She rebuilt schools after floods, trained rural teachers, sent books to children in conflict zones, paid scholarships for girls whose villages believed education was wasted on them." "Under what foundation?" Kylan asked. No one answered at first. Then Elias did. "Under no name anyone could trace." The agent added quietly, "All grants were signed the same way." She slid a single document toward him. At the bottom were 4 words. "For every child waiting." Kylan looked up. "You did all this?" Zara answered in the same calm tone she used for everything. "I continued what my mother began." He turned away, because the weight of who she truly was had become almost unbearable. He had mocked her in public, exiled her inside his own home, reduced her to a legal inconvenience. Meanwhile, she had spent years changing lives without cameras, applause, or recognition. That afternoon, journalists gathered outside the estate gates after rumors of the federal arrests leaked to the press. Networks requested statements. International outlets called. 3 publicists tried to force a response. Zara refused them all. Instead, she asked if the satellite room upstairs had a stable internet connection. "For what?" Kylan asked, still dazed. "My reading class starts in 20 minutes. He stared at her. She looked back, puzzled. "They're preparing for exams." And while the media shouted outside, Zara sat before a laptop and taught verbs, story structure, and confidence to children thousands of miles away. Kylan watched from the doorway, not as a husband, not as a billionaire, as a man witnessing a standard of greatness he had never learned to measure. That night, he walked alone to the old guest quarters where he had first placed her. He looked at the narrow bed, the worn bookshelf, the simple desk, and suddenly the room looked like a mirror held against his character. Every insult he had designed now stood around him like evidence. He went to find her. She was packing. His breath caught. "You're leaving?" "Yes." "Because of what I did?" "No," she said. "Because what needed protecting no longer needs to hide here." He stepped closer. "I was cruel." She did not deny it. "I was arrogant." Still, she said nothing. "I treated you as if you were beneath me." Now she looked at him. "And what do you want me to say to that, Kylan?" The use of his name without title struck him harder than anger would have. He swallowed. "I want to know if forgiveness is possible." She studied him for a long moment, then answered with the kind of truth that leaves no room for performance. "Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing." The words landed quietly. but they changed everything. "I can forgive what was done in ignorance," she said. "Trust must be rebuilt by what you do next." He nodded slowly. Not because the answer comforted him, because it was fair. Days passed, then weeks, and for the first time in his adult life, Kylan began doing things no headline would ever record. He canceled a vanity gala and redirected the funds into mobile classrooms. He reopened employee scholarship programs his executives had once called unnecessary. He audited every charitable branch tied to Duvall Holdings. He spent evenings reviewing literacy logistics instead of acquisition memos. He stopped speaking over people, stopped using intimidation as intelligence, stopped mistaking command for leadership. He even asked the estate staff what they needed and listened to the answers. Nothing about his transformation was dramatic at first. That was the point. Real change is rarely theatrical. One morning, Zara found him in the lower courtyard repainting old desks for the staff children's study room. He was doing it badly. Paint stained his cuff. His tie was gone. He looked up when he saw her. "Unlearning," he said. She almost smiled. "That makes two of us." Months later, the old east wing of the estate was no longer a museum of wealth. It had become a learning center. Children of gardeners, drivers, assistants, and kitchen staff filled its rooms every afternoon. Books replaced display cabinets. Tutors replaced silence. And above the entrance, carved into polished wood, were the words Zara never intended to publicize. "For every child waiting." When reporters finally secured an interview with the mysterious woman linked to the aid investigation, they expected a dramatic confession, a heroic speech, a glamorous story. Instead, Zara sat in a plain blue dress and said, "A child should never lose their future because adults made greed look professional." That quote spread across the world. But what moved people even more was what came after. When asked why she had never claimed recognition for her work, she answered, "Because the work was never about being seen. It was about making sure children were." Kylan watched the interview from across the room, and for the first time in his life, he understood why his grandfather had forced his hand. Not to save a company, to save a man from becoming empty inside his own success. A year later, Zara returned to the village where her mother first taught her that knowledge was the one inheritance thieves could not keep. Kylan went with her. No cameras, no press package, no executive entourage. He helped unload books from a truck beneath a wide acacia tree while children circled him, laughing at how badly he hammered shelves. No one there cared about his billion-dollar surname. To them, he was simply the man carrying boxes beside Zara. And strangely, that became the title he valued most. That evening, as the sun burned gold across the schoolyard, Zara stood at the doorway of a rebuilt classroom and watched children race inside. Kylan walked to her side. "I can never undo who I was," he said. "No," she answered gently. "But you can refuse to remain him." He looked at her. "And will that ever be enough?" She thought for a moment, then said the words he would carry for the rest of his life. "It will be enough when your kindness no longer needs an audience." Years later, when business historians wrote about the restructuring of Duvall Holdings, they praised its ethical reforms, global education initiatives, and transparent charitable governance. They credited strategy, pressure, market wisdom. But the people who knew the truth understood it differently. An empire changed because one quiet woman refused to become bitter. Because she protected truth without worshiping power. because she knew that dignity does not need permission, and because a man raised to admire wealth was finally taught the value of worth. When Kylan's first son asked one day how he had met his mother, he did not tell the polished version used in magazines. He told the truth. "I met her when I was still too proud to recognize greatness." The child frowned. "What happened then?" Kylan smiled. "She taught me to." And somewhere not far away, Zara sat at a wooden desk reviewing another set of children's essays, writing the same kind of gentle notes she had written long before the wealth, the scandal, and the revelations. Excellent effort. Keep thinking bravely. Never believe a quiet voice cannot change the world. Because in the end, that was the lesson hidden inside everything. The loudest people are not always the strongest. The richest people are not always the greatest. And sometimes, the woman everyone overlooks is the one carrying enough courage, mercy, and truth to rebuild what pride nearly destroyed. So never mock simplicity, never underestimate service, and never assume you understand someone simply because they arrived without noise. Some people carry power that does not announce itself. Some people protect worlds you cannot yet see. And sometimes, the quiet African bride standing beside the man who shamed her is not entering his world at all. She is about to change it.